Welcome everyone to our 32nd Salon of the Maternal Gift Economy Breaking Through series, hosted by Genevieve, Vaughan, and the International Feminists for the Gift Economy. I'm Letitia Layson, your moderator. We are really excited for this conversation to take place with Genevieve, Vaughan, Vanda Shiva, who's returning again, Anna, Isla, and Angela Miles. Genevieve is going to speak for 25 minutes, and then Vandana, Anna, and Angela will speak for 15 minutes each, which will give us time at the end for questions. I'm so thrilled that this conversation, Marx, the market, and the mother, is taking place. This, I think, is sort of the entry point of Genevieve into the maternal gift economy in her life. So for those of you who may not know Genevieve, she's an independent researcher who lives part-time in Italy and part-time in Texas. She created a multicultural, all-woman activist foundation for compassionate society from 1987 to 2005, and the Temple of Sekhmet in Nevada from 1992 through today. She co-created the network International Feminists for the Gift Economy in 2001, which are the women who support this effort coming forward. She's written many books, and without further ado, I want to remind you, if you'd like to read more about her, you can visit the website gift-economy.com and find out much more about her, her writings, and her books. So without further ado, Genevieve, please, welcome.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. So the title is, as you see, the Marx, the Market, and the Mother. We're in the midst of environmental collapse, poverty, disease, nuclear weapons, conventional war, lies, oligarchy. It's really a very critical moment on our planet and for us, everyone, everywhere. So in this time of general social and planetary upheaval, it is important to use every means necessary and possible to find the source of the problems and create a real strategy to solve them. I believe patriarchy and capitalism are the problem, but how and why? It has been 204 years since the birth of Karl Marx in Germany on May 5th, 1818, and he has been an immensely influential and controversial figure. His analysis of society gave us a perspective on how to create the desperately needed social change. However, I believe that his thinking, like that of all patriarchal philosophers before him and after him, had a fatal flaw. That is, it could not address the universal provisioning economy that already exists everywhere and since the beginning of time. The maternal gift economy, the economy of unilateral giving and receiving. Patriarchal philosophy and economics are incomplete. Patriarchy has not been able to answer its own questions about life because leaving out the experience of mothering and being mothered by eliminating the females who had that social function from the conversation, the philosophers created a blind spot that covered the everyday universal source of the answer. Even Marx might have heeded the cue in the word proletariat, which means the bearers of children. Prole from children and tariat from the Latin word for carry. The result of the blind spot is that patriarchal economics and philosophy are wrong because they leave out the necessary primary economy from which the market economy derives its form, its sustenance, and its meaning. So in spite of everything, they cannot be an effective guide to the kind of radical social change we need. I believe that Marx discovered the key to what is wrong in our society. But many people, even many Marxists, have not recognized it as such because it seems too simple. It takes a particular ability to reveal the obvious. That Marx recognized the importance of this key is shown by the fact that he placed it at the very beginning of his major work. The key is the equation X amount of commodity A equals Y amount of commodity B, which develops into X amount of commodity A equals Y amount of money. This equation is as important for economics and for daily life as E equals MC squared is for physics, but it's more important because it is ubiquitous in market society. We embrace it as real life, but it only has a social existence for a particular kind of society. Beginning Capital with this discussion, Marx affirms the commodity form or form of value as the core or central element of capitalism. Perhaps because he starts from such a simple beginning, we do not search for an earlier, simpler, and more widespread interaction of which the commodity form is the contradiction, that is, the maternal gift economy. The equation of value is important because it is the cell at the center of capitalism, and also because at the same time, it is the mechanism that denies and contradicts the maternal gift economy. Marx elaborated his whole description of capitalism beginning with this equation, then adding the equation X amount of commodity A equals Y amount of money, describing money as the general equivalent. In fact, the two kinds of equations are different in that exchange for money creates different relations and different possibilities. One exchanges with money in order to buy another commodity, CMC, or she exchanges money with commodities in order to make more money, MCM. This is the formula of capitalism. These two kinds of processes have different effects regarding gifting. In the first, a commodity is bought to be used, so it may return into the gift economy to nurture life. In the second, the purpose is giving money to money, nurturing money, making it, not a child, grow. To do this, money is made by taking gifts from others, from the surplus labor of the producers, from the gift labor of the domestic sphere, and from the gifting environmental niches of Mother Earth. Alfred Sonrathel, who lived from 1899 to 1990, was a Marxist philosopher whose ideas have recently gained ground. After many years of deep concentration on an intuition he had in his youth, Sonrathel came up with a surprising idea: that the exchange of commodities and money create an abstraction on the reality plane, and that this material or real abstraction, which people practice every day, makes us think abstractly. That is, the exchange of two unlike products or for money, or products for money as general equivalent, this exchange is itself abstract, and as a part of reality, it is where our abstract ideas come from. This hypothesis gives a completely different perspective on abstract thought, and it is part of the puzzle of what is wrong with our society. One of the effects of the exchange abstraction is that the activities that remain outside the purview of exchange remain hidden or at least they are approached at a different level of understanding from those that are approached abstractly. The domestic sphere, early childhood, and the mothering of young children remain largely outside exchange and therefore outside the exchange abstraction. Indigenous societies that had and have gift economies and honor Mother Earth also remain outside the area of the exchange abstraction. At least they did before conquest. I believe it is possible that the blind spot caused by the contradiction of the maternal gift economy, which comes from the equation of value and exchange for money, in combination with the real abstraction, have made the people who are thoroughly engaged with patriarchal capitalism unable to comprehend the source and the practice of life based on gifting, the deep continuity with Mother Earth and all the species, and the continuity among humans of all races and nations, as well as within their communities and between their own minds and bodies as individuals. It is for this reason that, impervious to suffering of the multitude, many of us are still permitting the degradation and destruction of all life as they and we try to make immense profits. I have been fascinated for many years with the idea of language as verbal gift giving and have written several books and many articles about it. This idea is very different from the kind of abstract linguistics and semiotics that now feed the market through the advertising, communication, and computer industries. As a mother, I had the experience of practicing the gift economy and of helping my children learn language. However, as a member of this capitalist society, I have also learned the perspective of exchange. And as a student of Marx and Sonrathel, I have learned about the equation of value, money, capital, and the exchange abstraction, as well as many other issues. So what I think I may have been doing in my work is projecting the abstraction into mothering and gifting so as to see it in terms of the abstract schemas that would place it at the same level of abstraction as the exchange-based philosophical and scientific thinking that is typical of our society. And so to make the maternal gift economy understandable to the mainstream. Doing this, I try to make the thread and structure of the gift visible everywhere, from perception to language to human relations. And on this background, it is also possible to recognize how the market exploits gifting and how gifts reappear in the tangle of the market context, for example, in the so-called giving of loans or jobs. Recognizing the schema of the gift as functional in cognition as well as in personal interaction and communication is important as an explanation of these functions. Thus, it is not, as Kant believed, that the categories and the schemas of knowledge are the original form of the mind, or that, as Sonrathel believed, they are derived from exchange, but they are originally derived from the actual mother-child giving and receiving. This can be recognized also if we think of perception as the reception of gifts of the world through our senses, which are perfectly adapted to receive those gifts. Looking at language as verbal and conceptual gifting enlarges the picture. In fact, it seems that once we look beyond exchange, we are living in an altogether gift-based world, a mother world. So these are just a design that shows giving and receiving, and how we look through that to find our perceptions and gifts of the world. Change, please. Perhaps it has not been easy for society to recognize the gift schema because the patterns of the gift are not originally abstract. They are integrated in life as a synthesis among nature, nurture, mind, the body, the individual, the dyad, and society. And they generalize through repetition in different areas of life. However, I believe the relations of giving and receiving are projected into many of our artifacts. Here's a picture of giving and receiving projected onto the material plane and the puzzle. Change. Another way of giving and receiving. Again, not change, please. And here's more. We have so many of these pictures, so many of these material expressions of things being given to each other and functioning. Change, please. Shifting the paradigm towards the gift. Shifting the paradigm has been made more feasible by the indigenous people who have studied in the patriarchal capitalist universities while retaining their indigenous knowledges, and thereby are able to bring forward their gift-based values in terms colonial settlers, and we who are the descendants of settlers can understand. Similarly, African Americans who have maintained caring and community values in spite of enormous oppression give examples of acting within the gift paradigm, which may hark back to the gifting traditions in Africa. The possibility of radical change has also been facilitated by the kind of feminism that has encouraged women to trust their own experience and intuition beyond the dictates of patriarchal capitalist thinking inside and outside of the academy. Although gifting has not been studied directly, the subject has been broached tangentially by some developments of mainstream science, which have begun to study infancy, the brain, and mirror neurons, and especially by interpersonal neuropsychology, which studies the mother-child relation. These reference gifting without calling it that. There are also academics who promote the well-being of children to create social change through gift environments, who are now recognizing gifting. The gift interaction extends to the world around the child in the evolved developmental nest, as identified by Darshan Narvaez and her colleagues. Here, children's multiple needs are satisfied by a nurturing community. That is, the gifts come from the community to the children according to the specific needs of the children, and from different people in the community as well. Change. We are surrounded by unilateral gifts, but we don't recognize them as such because we use other words to talk about them. Restoring the gift paradigm can allow us to understand our contact with the environment as the reception of perceptual and conceptual gifts. The Capitalist Schema, which is the name of a book by Christian Lotz, is a description of a worldview that centers on exchange, the dissimulation of gifts, and their misdirection into the accumulation of capital away from the needs of the many. The social nexus of exchange is adversarial and ego-oriented, separating people from each other and from the understanding of the community and the environment as gifting. So when you begin to see the environment as gifting, you can see the affordances, which is a term invented by J.J. Gibson. An affordance is of the chair, for example, is that you can sit on it. So the affordance of that object is its gift for humans. And here you see this person playing with this object and experimenting it as a gift for humans. So let's change. Infant experience of maternal valence tagging foreshadows the estimation of value through money. Having survived by experiencing life as receiving gifts as well as giving some of her own, sounds and cries and movements that are received and interpreted by others, and bodily products of elimination, A young child's perception of the world around her is influenced by her mother's facial expressions and reactions to the world, as well as joint attention to things, which are gifts of perception of the environment that adult and child receive together. And this causes a bonding of mothers and children in front of the gifts of the world. The mother's reactions establish positive and negative valences regarding the things in the child's surroundings. These valences, or positive or negative values, are the precursors of positive and negative economic value, seen as quantitative difference when it's passed through the social mechanism of the equation of value and exchange. Gift value is the value of the receiver for the giver. By satisfying children's needs unilaterally, mothers give value to the children by implication. That is, if they had not valued them, they would not have given to them. In fact, they attribute intrinsic value to the children or recognize it in them. This repeated attribution of value registers in the child as self-esteem. Exchange value eliminates or sets aside gift value because it is in fact value in a conditional quid pro quo process. It is not the value of the receiver, but of the product. Quid pro quo exchange value is the contradiction of gift value. Profit is a gift given by the worker to the capitalist, consisting of unpaid surplus labor. Surplus labor also contains the free reproductive labor of the domestic sphere. Givers of surplus labor and free housework do not usually know they are giving these free gifts. And the capitalist herself thinks that she is making the money herself or himself. However, perhaps unconsciously, this profit that comes from outside seems to give gift value to the capitalist, motivating his or her self-esteem and her greed. That is, as if the mother or the market were giving specially to her. It is in the interaction of gift and exchange that the secret of the market and capitalism lie. The process of mothering and being mothered and the general importance of that process as an economic model have not been investigated as such. They have been invisible. But I am trying to show that gifting is the background against which the market economy takes place and from which it draws its sustenance. It is the gifting host of the market parasite. In fact, it is just because we have not seen mothering as implementing a basic human schema, we have seen the discourse on mothering as essentialist and excluded it from feminism so often. We have blamed the victim and have not recognized that it is the patriarchal capitalist context that penalizes motherers and the gift economy, while quid pro quo exchange appears to provide well-being and self-respect. It's completely turned around. Need to change. Yeah.
You should see it.
Morality and psychology. Gift and exchange coexist in the market and throughout our life in society. Because we don't recognize this state of affairs or see gifting as a mode of production and distribution, or now under capitalism as a mode of distribution that has largely been deprived of its mode of production, we give other names to gifting and over or underemphasize it. We call it morality, sacrifice, saintliness, or even masochism. We do not recognize its schematic character for thinking, perceiving, and relating to the world and each other. It seems to be an individual choice that is idiosyncratic in a real world that is rightly egocentric. Moreover, choosing to be the other oriented, choosing to be other oriented or ego oriented seems to regard only one's own conscience and not be related to economics. Change. So I have a list of the different aspects of the paradigm in our lives. And I just will go through those and then be done. So on the one hand, on the one side, on the left side is gift, and on the right side, it's exchange. So gifting requires abundance and also creates it. Exchange requires and creates scarcity for leverage. Gifting implies imbalance towards others. Exchange requires balance in binary interactions, equality. Positive relations of mutuality and trust are part and product of gifting. In exchange, we have debt and obligation, servitude and suspicion. In gifting, there is community interdependence. In exchange, there's separation and independence. In gifting, the need calls forth the gift. And we see that in emergencies, how that still happens now, where people go and try to help each other. But in exchange, one must deserve to receive. And of course, the view of the immigrants trying to cross borders with great need, who are trying to solve the problems, we can see that their reception is not happening usually according to gifting, but according to exchange, in which there's separation, and we believe they have to give something in order to get back the capacity to immigrate. Gifting gives to the market without actually knowing it. We don't realize that profit is made up of our gifts, of surplus labor. Exchange takes from the givers, but denies and hides the source. Gifting is truth-telling. That is, it satisfies the need of the other to know what is actually happening, while exchange has with it lies and subterfuge, because it uses what it says not to satisfy the need of the other, but to satisfy the need of the speaker for some usually bad purpose. So gifting produces integrity and self-confidence, while exchange is consonant with guilt, preparing to pay back. So if you do something wrong, then you're guilty and you pay. You step into the exchange paradigm. Forgiving is part of the gifting paradigm, and vengeance, paying back again, is part of the exchange paradigm. Peace would come from gifting in the gift economy, and war is exactly consonant with the exchange economy. There is another page to that if it came before it. There. So we're looking at the first part second, but anyway. So in the gift paradigm, it's unilateral giving and turn taking, and exchange constrained bilateral exchange. Gift is other oriented, exchange is ego oriented. In the gift, we mind read other people's needs, mind read in the sense that we pay a lot of attention to them and figure out what it is they need, or listen to what they say and know what it is by that. An exchange is the expression of needs in money. You have to have the money to satisfy your need. Gifting gives value to the other. Exchange gives value to yourself. Gifting is cooperative. Exchange is competitive. Gifting is mostly qualitative. Exchange is mostly quantitative. Gifting passes the gift forward, and in exchange we accumulate and the gift stops. Gifting has a transitive logic. Exchange is the logic of equation, categorization, and identity. Gifting includes the other, and exchange defends the self from the other. Gifting provides compassion and generosity. Exchange, again, provides justice if it's well done, but justice is also part of the exchange in the sense of paying back for what the wrongdoing. Although now there is a more compassionate justice that is being tried and implemented in a lot of places, but usually it's a question of punishment. And the gifting is based on the creative receiving, on the receiver as doing her part in getting the gift, receiving the gift and consuming it or using it. Whereas in exchange, we look at earning the commodity and taking the profit. So this is the list of different characteristics from the different paradigms. And I think it's really the main thing is that the gift has not been seen as paradigmatic, as having a structure, as having a logic. And we can see it as that, and that will help us recognize it and return to acting in those ways and devalue the exchange economy, which is taking us really off the edge of the precipice into oblivion, if you like. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. That was fabulous. That was wonderful. So we're going to go to our next speaker, which is Vanda Shiva. Vandana, thank you again for coming. I know it's late in India, and so we also know that you may have to dodge out before the end of our session today. But for those of you who don't know Dr. Shiva, she was trained as a physicist and founded Vandana, a national movement to protect the diversity and the integrity of living resources, especially native seed, the promotion of organic farming and fair trade. She's also established an international college for sustainable living in collaboration with Schumacher College in the UK. She has been recognized as an environmental hero by Time magazine in 2003. She is the author of many books, the winner of many awards, and you can learn more about her specific work and her books at her website, navdanya.org. So without further ado, welcome, Dr. Shiva.
Thank you so much, Letizia. And thank you, Jen, for drawing us all together again and constantly evolving your deep thinking about the gift economy. My own work has even though they're presented constantly as poor because they don't deal with money. And every time the money enters our societies and our cultures, People go into deep dispossession, people go into deep degradation, and that's how the beginning of the refugee crisis starts. We wouldn't be alive without the gifts of Mother Earth. And I think capitalist patriarchy has been built on denials of the earth as living and a blindness to her gifts in order to be able to exploit her gifts and turn them into property, either property in land or property in intellectual property, owning the seed. This has been the basis of the creation of Navanya, which means 9 seeds, but it's basically not just protecting the rich gifts of biodiversity that the earth has given us, but the even richer biodiversity of seeds that our ancestors, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers have evolved. You know, like rice, one wild plant evolved into 200,000 rice varieties. And in the Navanya community seed banks, we have saved about 4,000 of them, including seeds that can tolerate salt and floods and are becoming the basis of people surviving the extreme climate events, including intense cyclones and frequent cyclones. We won't be breathing without the gifts of the earth. Yeah. So I think the first is an economic denial that nature is creative, that people are creative, women are creative. The second is creating an epistemology of denialism, that you can only know in a mechanical way. And this is where the architects of capitalist patriarchal science, whether it be Bacon or it be Descartes, they come into the picture, just like Locke is the basis of creating property. And given that I try and make sense of what was happening to my land and our colonization, and I read these people and what were they saying and doing, here is Locke writing in England during the enclosures of the commons, but not talking about the enclosures of the commons, talking about the primitiveness of the First Nations of America, who have to be enhanced, a new word that's coming back in a big way. All the people who want to put chips in.
Vandana, you've frozen. I wonder if you could try turning your camera off and see if we can just have your sound.
Sure. Is it getting stuck? Yeah, because I'm actually traveling and I'm in a remote hotel, so it won't work too well. But yeah, I have a little more time.
Yes.
So we won't be breathing without the green leaf. And I call that the ultimate technology. Yeah, the sunshine. And I wish more of our friends who are looking at solar energy would look at solar energy in interaction with the Earth's gift economy. Because here is the sun, shines on the leaf through photosynthesis. The leaf absorbs carbon dioxide, turns it into our food and our oxygen. Yeah, it turns it into life. So the gift of the earth is life itself. And the money economy is a denial of life, an appropriation of living systems, as if the creativity came from money and capital. And all the literature, the intellectual property literature, give you 2 examples. I worked on seeds. Now the seeds are what generate. The seed has the power to reproduce. When you call it intellectual property, you are appropriating the power of the seed and calling it yours. So Monsanto, in effect, tried to behave as if they were the creators and inventors of life. And that's been my work now for 35 years, challenging that. Or saying the soil is dead, soil is inert, it's the fertilizers that give it life. And Jen talked about the absurdity and the violence this is bringing us to in the table she presented us at the end is such a brilliant summary of why things are going wrong and how the gift economy can set it right. Let me give you just two areas of how badly things are going if we allow the logic of appropriation, extractivism, gift denial, gift parasitism of capitalist patriarchy to carry on. So just in the last week, two things I have read. One, Canada, two people have asked for medically assisted suicide because they can't afford to pay rents. Two disabled people have asked for ending their lives because they can't afford to pay rents. And just like food, a gift everyone should have, water is a gift everyone should have, breathing is a gift everyone should have, every being on this planet has shelter. And it is a great economy that has created a real estate business where people are being denied their right to home. People in the South, by their being invaded, but even in prosperous economy, Canada, two people just in the last maybe 10 days, two people. Worse, just because we've created a system where with the gift that moves from generation to generation, the gift of wisdom, the gift of lifetime learning, that gift is not seen and counted. And the old people are seen as people whom we've siphoned off. They've now been put into old age homes. And why on earth should we maintain their lives? So two things have happened around this issue. The former director of IMF, and she's now head of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, she actually said, old people, taking care of old people is becoming inconsistent with the global economy. So the gift of life that is everyone's right is suddenly being defined as a burden on the global economy, and the global economy, which is the money economy, is becoming the basis of deciding who will live and who will die. And there was actually, this was a title of a newspaper article in New York Times when I was coming back at the time of COVID and the lockdown. But there's been a paper written since then in a professional journal of medicine, The Case for Killing Granny. So when you deny the gift economy, you convert everything to money, then genocide and ecocide becomes its logical conclusion. It's not an accident. It is where it ends. And they're already talking about the genocide of old people in clear economic terms, that it makes sense to let old people die and kill them. And I think we should be looking at this much more closely. And then to look towards nature's economy and her gift economy. When I started working on ecology 50 years ago, for us, nature's economy was what nature gives us. And because I've done many studies, we used to give value. We give value to the minerals in the mountain and the water they supply, or all the economy that a river flowing free provides. But we did this as a valuation of what was not being seen, not in terms of bringing it to the market. The marketization, the exchange value that Jen has laid out so clearly, already is a disruption of the real value. But with globalization, with neoliberalism, new instruments of fictitious money have been created. So if you go back to the subprime crisis in 2007, 2008, they took the same house, created derivatives, created securitization. The same real house was sold many times over, and this is the ultimate abstraction. And this abstraction then allowed the same house to be sold many times over as an asset. Of course, the house of cards collapsed, and the subprime prices led to the total disruption of Wall Street and the global economy. That time, they used to assess that the economy as formal movement of goods and services, the real economy was 90 trillion. But with these ways of doing financial transactions, digital transactions, algorithm-driven transactions, which is every step further abstraction of the value, they had increased it to 517. And so now they're saying, well, we can do the same with nature. Nature provides water, nature provides oxygen, nature provides all kinds of systems that, according to them, provides 125 trillion, which I think is a total underestimation. But they say we can make that 125 trillion an economy of 4,000 trillion by turning nature into an asset. And they've actually created new asset companies just before COP26. Now, who will own this 4,000 trillion? It'll be people who are running stock markets. There'll be the BlackRocks and the Vanguards. And you can just see what this will mean. Just like in the earlier stages of development, you could drive off indigenous people from their land in the name of development and growth. This nature's economy that they're trying to create will mean that no person can have access to water of rivers that flow. It'll have to be mediated by the financial system to create the 4,000 trillion for them, or the soil and its amazing ecological functions. Every bit of soil and every organism will be owned and controlled. And I just saw a piece. For me, it's very sad to see all the work we've done to show this is what nature does. These are her gifts: the soil organisms, the mycorrhizal fungi, the mutuality between the plant and the soil fungi. It's interesting because this knowledge, which we have generated over decades to protect the earth, to recognize the gifts, is now being appropriated for the next round of money making. And they're now saying, oh, we'll now use the soil bacteria to make food in the labs, to forget the soil and forget the farmer and forget the women and forget the indigenous people. So waking up to the gift economy at this point is a survival issue for humanity and all the species and all the beings that are being driven to extinction. Just as the market logic and the money valuation leads to genocide by actually saying, let the poor people die, let the old people die, and they'll just create more and more categories of people who should be allowed to die. But it is a recipe for ecocide, because when you do not protect Mother Earth in her integrity, for her gift-giving capacity, and you try and take every element of her gift and financialize it, that is ecocide. And thank you, Jen, again, for constantly making us think in fresh ways about the problems and challenges we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vanda Shiva. You can turn your camera back on. We would love to see your face so that we can just smile at you and thank you for that wonderful circling back. I think that there is a very important thing that you say, of course, the co-opting of living systems, everything that's in relationship to life itself is just a travesty. And that waking up to the gift economy is really the solution. We really need to take that to heart. And I hope that we can share this salon with many. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. And please stay as long as you can. We would love to have you with us, but we'll understand if you need to go to sleep because you're traveling. But we want to thank you so much for being there. Jen, did you want to say anything to Vandana before in case she needs to duck out?
No, just thank you so much for coming. And it's always wonderful to hear you and enlightening. And so it's great to see you also. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Vandana. You always bring it back right to the earth and to the soil. What Jen is actually saying, this radical notion of going back to the mother and back to Mother Earth. And with that, I want to welcome our next speaker, Anna Isla. She's a professor emerita from the Department of Sociology and the Center for Women and Gender Studies at Brock University in Canada. She's living in Canada and in Peru. She's the author of Greening of Costa Rica, Women, Peasant, Indigenous People, and the Remaking of Nature, and the editor of Climate Chaos, Ecofeminism, and the Land Question. She also authored several articles on extractivism in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Jane. Genevieve, you have been so incredible, wonderful person with my whole career. I like to integrate the analysis of two spheres, production and reproduction, which was taken by some male eco-socialists, mainly, I would say, James O'Connor and Joe Coble. I will start with them because they were really very important in this mixing between production and reproduction in the eco-socialist framework. Eco-socialists have concentrated on capitalism and its destructive activities in the sphere of production. According to James O'Connor, he divided this contradiction in two parts. The first contradiction, according to him, comes from Marx, who understood that the point of departure of the traditional Marxist theory of crisis is the contradiction between capitalist productive forces and productive relations. This is the first contradiction, as I said. The agent of this socialist revolution was the working class. Economic crisis structures productive forces and production relations by planning nationalization. The site of transformation is politics. We have been following the struggle of the working class for the 8 hours for so many centuries, I will say. But the point of departure of the ecological Marxism theory of economic crisis is the contradiction between capitalist production relations and productive forces and the conditions of capitalist production. These conditions are the reproduction and the natural environment, which he calls the second contradiction. The critical mass in this particular times is the new social movements. The social relationship of reproduction of the conditions of production constitute the immediate object of social transformation. People are fighting for the transformation of the state, the family as structures of social relations, and the relation of production themselves, such as the land use pattern. The land use pattern has so many consequences, especially since the land or the earth has been declared as natural capital, which I will discuss later. Since the conditions of production are not produced or reproduced capitalistically, however, are sold and bought and utilized as if they were commodities, the conditions of supply must be regulated by the state, which places itself between capital and nature, with the immediate result that the conditions of capitalist productions are politicized. We can see now a whole fight. The class struggle has been expanded all over the world. As capital restructures the conditions of production, such as regional land use, population policy, labor market regulation, the capital is contested everywhere. Joe Cobble also is another eco-socialist who argues that gender is the point at which human beings interact with nature according to the notion of difference. We cannot imagine a world without gender, which is grounded in nature. We can ignore also the fact of the class struggle, but we cannot ignore the gender situation because it's grounded in nature. Our capacity to transform nature is itself gendered, as is the language with which we account for reality. The primary division of labor is organized by gender. Our body connects male and female functions with the sky, the moon, the wind, and the waters. None of them are tied inherently to domination and violence. However, violence and dominance also enter the world as gendered. This might be because female embodied productive labor, reproductive power, and sexuality considered wild. In civilization, women are sunk with nature, and nature and women are alike devalued. Capital is far from being a rational system of market relations, widening the split between the sexes through the intense degree of rationalization imposed by the generalized exchange and monetization. This birthed forth in modernity with the great witch hunt. Capital also ushered women's devaluation to the generalized commodification of labor. In sum, they argue, these eco-socialists argue that capitalist civilization is a heat engine and its economy is an entropic flow of energy, oil, gas, carbon, and materials, timber, aluminum, copper. As eco-socialists rethink society, where exchange becomes subordinated to use and intrinsic value, they propose a different set of needs and productive relations with ecosystemic form, using the female principle of caring for gathering, providing and bringing the groundwork of an integral ecosystem. What is socialist ecofeminism? Socialist ecofeminists and eco-socialism join forces in denouncing the dynamic of the capitalist model of production in the sphere of reproduction and women's responsibility for it. They locate the origins of oppression in the interconnected systems of patriarchy, colonialism, and capitalism. There are many strands of the ecofeminist movement, but most agree that the source of women's domination is domestic labor resulting from a capitalist patriarchal economy dominated by men. Mary Mellor argues that ecofeminism, materialist, stresses the immanence we embodied and we are embedded in human existence, in particular natural environments. As embodied beings, humanity cannot avoid the biological cycle of birth, maturation, and death. Human development is also embedded within a particular ecological framework. In the process, humanity acts on nature with material consequences for the ecosystem. Marilyn Waring also argues that the international economic system based on the system of national accounts using the gross domestic product index construct reality in the way that excludes the great bulk of women's work, peasant and indigenous labor, and nature. Official economic measures only count production for the market and give no value to nature, women's work or reproduction, or other productive work largely in the South that is not commodified. Carolyn Merchant argues that the rise of modern science and technology was premised on the violent attack and rape of Mother Earth, an attack mirroring the state-authorized burning of women midwives and healers as witches. She establishes two contradictions in the working of development. First, it arises from the assault by capitalist economic forces of production on local ecological conditions. Second, there is the assault of production on biological and social reproduction. She advocates a radical ecology where social movements such as bioregional movements, grassroots struggle, and mainstream environmental campaigning replace social class as political agents. She concludes that ecofeminism will emphasize both production and reproduction. Silvia Federici also argues that capitalist accumulation relies on the unpaid work of housewives, indentured servants, and colonized people. She describes enclosure as both a historical and contemporary phenomenon. It involves fencing off the commons through the elimination of people's customary rights. Enclosure initiated in England circa of 1500 continues through the establishment of national parks at this particular time, and all different kinds of biological parks, etc. With the enclosure of common lands, the social aspect of a community and its autonomy were curtailed and even eliminated. Federici argues that the enclosure of the commons and the witch hunts in Europe produced a new sexual division of labor in which women's position as providers in society was redefined in relation to men as wives, daughters, mothers, and widows, all of whom hide their status of workers, while giving men free access to women's bodies, their labor, and the bodies and labor of their children. With the advent of capitalism, women's reproductive labor was placed at the service of an international system of accumulation. Women's wombs become public property, producing labor power for free. Maria Mies is another ecofeminist who connects the subordination of women, the degradation of nature, and capitalist economics. She explains that housewifeization is a capitalist patriarchal ideology that serves to define some human beings and natures as having no value. Housewifeization thereby condemned women to responsibility for the sphere of reproduction. Mies sees housewifeization as one aspect of a system of exploitation that embrace the low-paid or unpaid labor of women, destruction of the natural environments, and the colonization of the resources and knowledge of indigenous people around the world. At the center of her analysis is the knowledge that capitalist patriarchy creates an intersecting domination against all unwage labor. The result is seen in the expropriation of unpaid and poorly paid labor of women and often LGBTQ people. The expropriation of labor, knowledge, and subsistence economies of peasant indigenous people, those who appropriate living nature in order to make it productive, care little about the destruction. Feminized or resources bodies are routinely appropriated, exploited, raped, extracted, and destroyed in capitalist expansion. Veronica Benham Thompson and Maria Mies uncovered the functioning in capitalists in what they call the Iceberg Model. First, there is the expropriation of unpaid and poorly paid labor of women is through rape, harassment, and sexual assaults. Second, the expropriation of labor, knowledge, and subsistence economies of peasant indigenous people is through genocide. Their land are labeled unoccupied or unused, and thereby easily appropriated by those who can make it productive. Third, the expropriation of nature is through destruction. These authors argue that Western capitalist consumerism should be replaced by a renewal of basic subsistence production. Ariel Saleh also adopted the language of Marx to explore embodied materialism, seeing the link between nature, women, labor, and capitalism as a deeper contradiction than that between capital and labor that Marx had analyzed. She re-examines the concept of labor, and she calls relation of production. Here, work that is invisible to the forces of production, namely meta-industrial labor, are four. Women's work reproduces working bodies. Peasant work sustains metabolic relations with nature. Indigenous peoples create lay knowledge of ecology. And nature self-activity regenerates biological infrastructure. However, women remain simply taken for granted as a natural resource, and the bodies of colonized people are seen as resource for sexuality, slave labor, or their DNA. Saleh, in outlining the meta-industrial labor, claims that unembodied materialist analysis have the following components. The meta-industrial labor reproduces necessary biological infrastructure for all economic systems. They are women, peasant, indigenous people, and nature. It functions both inside and outside of capitalism. All of them work functions inside and outside of capitalism. They are ecological benign provisioning, are able to sustain metabolic relations with nature. For instance, all of them, women, when they have a child, their product doesn't create destruction. When the peasant produce food, they don't use chemicals and they create all the food system, similar to the indigenous people and nature. Their economy don't leave future generations with ecological debt. All who works in meta-industrial provisioning have a common material stake in challenging capitalist development. This labor class may well be the most appropriate agent of history. They are seen as the critical mass at this time. The materialist ecofeminists of Merchant, Waring, Mellor, Federici, Mies, Benhold Thompson, and Saleh challenge the sustainability of contemporary societies as well as their economic restructuring by the so-called sustainable development. What is the ecofeminist politics or the political economy of ecofeminism? In writing this book of Greening Costa Rica, Women, Peasant, Indigenous People, and the Remaking of Nature, I discovered how the economists from the World Bank have proposed that ecosystemic process must be embedded in the price system. That is, nature requires a fully monetized world in order to be protected. within sustainable development, they develop a key concept, which is natural capital, which refers to the goods and services provided by the planet's stock of water, land, air, and renewable and non-renewable resources, such as plant and animal species, forests, and minerals. From an ecofeminist perspective, in green capitalism, the enclosure of the common, housewifization, and expropriation of peasant and indigenous peoples continues when monetary value is assigned to the commons, forcing them to acquire new roles as service providers in new industries and the destruction of nature. An economy constructed excluding much of the materiality of human and non-human lives destroy the ecosystems. In my book, I analyze the financial debt, the embodied debt to reproductive labor, and the ecological debt. It describes the role of some environmental NGOs as brokers between the indebted country resources with large corporations involved in economic restructuring and globalization. NGOs have been establishing national parks and other kinds of parks and giving monetary values to the global commons of the indebted periphery, such as the biodiversity for biotechnology and intellectual property rights, forests for carbon credits, and scenery for ecotourism, and to export these values in stock exchanges.
Anna, can you come to a conclusion in about 3 minutes? Okay.
I want just to say how this whole condition, the new conditions created after the Earth Summits in 1992, in 2002 and 2012, created new conditions in which the so-called green economy have produced new ways for the expansion of extractivism. Extractivism has been the new condition all over the world. In the case of Latin America, we have seen since 2005, women have been able to meet together all over Latin America to discuss the problems created, the militarization, the fact that all these men, new men, military and workers for the corporations are taking over all this, the economy, all the subsistence economy. They are forced to move out. In Central America, we can see how most of these women and men are moving over the United States, where the United States also, they separate these families. They are completely in conditions in which the extractivism has been the new force of militarization all over the region. The new conditions created by sustainable development is the extractivism, because they need all the metals. They need the minerals to create new cars, to create new solar panels. All of them require minerals. Therefore, all these countries are being devastated by the new understanding of natural capital. Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that is, Dr. Vanda Shiva often reminds us that green capitalism is not green, that it is extractive, that it's militaristic, and you have just affirmed that in your living experience. And thank you so much for bringing that forward. Really appreciate that. I'm sure there might be lots of questions for you later on. Our next presenter is Angela Miles. She is the founding member of Toronto Women for a Just and Healthy Planet, Antigush Women's Association, Feminist Network for a Gift Economy and a member of the editorial board of Canadian Women's Studies. She is Professor Emerita at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education of the University of Toronto, where she co-founded the International Women's Human Rights Education Summer Institute. Her publications include Integrative Feminisms, Building Global Visions, and the edited collection, Women in the Globalizing World, Transforming Equality, Development, Diversity, and Peace. Welcome, Angela.
Yes, thanks very much. This is really both inspiring and scary. Hearing the previous really powerful presentations, and we've always known, I think, most of us here, I guess, listening for a long time, that capitalism is not life enhancing, that it is appropriative, exploitative, destructive, oppressive. And I think in this current period with the neoliberal financialization of this system, we are seeing really the end game, or the logic and the essence of this patriarchal class capitalist, not just capitalist, but this class patriarchal colonial system. It's really the time that we need to be understanding, I think, what gift economy theorizing gives us. As I say, it's not news that this is an awful system. And if we didn't know it, from the very beginning, we surely know now that we're in a war, we're in a pandemic, we're in ecological disasters on every face of this planet, that we need to change things, and the change needs to be very, very deep. And a lot of us, and probably everybody here who's listening, has been making the struggle on various fronts for a long, long time. We've wanted to have reproductive labor and nature and the significance of those things recognized. We've resisted the fact, the obvious, crazy lie that value, the only value we can use to determine our policy or to understand the world is money in the market. That's a madness that we've lived with, and we've known, and we've objected. We've tried to carve out areas that wouldn't be in the economy, that wouldn't be financialized. Maybe we should have some, we shouldn't have water for, or air, or food, or childcare, or maybe all the things we need shouldn't be in the market. Lots of ways of fighting back. We surely should have anyway. I think probably the fact that this is in itself life and human denying. I think a lot of us are maybe feeling, well, we have been for a while, how can we have our reproductive labor recognized, or nature recognized, without putting it in the market? And now we're seeing that what Anna and Vandana have said to us, we better be careful because it's being shoved into the market. We got to keep it out of the market. And not only that, but we really have to find different ways back to our humanity. And I think what I'd like to do in whatever time I have left is look at the ways that Genevieve Vaughan's theorizing of gift economy and as a paradigm, and giving as a paradigm, very different from exchange, is the kind of basis we need to ground the struggle in a strong vision of the direction we need to go and in the alternatives that are available. And I want to just briefly describe that basic paradigm that she's been building on and looking at in her talk here in terms of what that means for money and exchange and the abstraction. A gift paradigm that Genevieve has, that we all live by and we all depend on, and Genevieve has theorized, is a sense of a unilateral recognition, a gift. It's a flow from one to another, and that's receiving and exchanging. And that paradigm is the one we're all born into. It's the one that shapes us as human beings. It's the one that we learn our relation to each other in society. The exchange, however, as a paradigm, is a self-referencing relationship. Exchange, by definition, is something you engage in for what you will get in return. It's not a direct human relationship in which we recognize each other directly. And that exchange, whether it's engaged in because we both want something we have and we want to give it to each other, or whatever the intention, exchange is self-referential. And we know when we're looking at the capitalist market, we're looking at unequal exchange. We're looking at the unequal relationship of the wage, and we're looking at the profit that's made from goods and services. And we know that the money market interrupts the flow of goods where they're needed. They can only go where you have money. And by that definition, where things are most needed, they are not most available. They are least available. If we want to think of a human economy that works, then we don't think of money as an enabling factor. It is a barrier, and it's that whole that money is nothing except just a danger, an impoverishing thing, is really evident when you see financialized capitalism, and they're financializing everything, and they're making food into a means for profit so that it's no longer is even less than it ever was a source before of food and nourishment. This is very true. Once thing is monetized and commodified, it is no longer itself. It isn't the use value that it had. It is the money value only, and one denies the other. So as I say, we're seeing this very, very clearly. And it is interesting in this period that Marxists are coming to look more at what Marx had to say in the 1844 manuscripts, and actually periodically through his further work. And what I think he was looking forward to getting back to looking at, which is this question of alienation. He did spend, he did end up spending many, many years looking at, at the actual relationships of capitalism, and going into the British Library every day and working hard to understand the ways that the unequal wage relation fed the workers' bosses and fed the power against them, and alienated their own powers, so that he wrote a lot about that, and he understood that. And he did also, as Marxists are going back and looking at again, see how ultimately that the abstraction of value in that way and in the market ultimately impoverished and destroyed relationships socially, generally, that this becomes a way of, it becomes to a certain degree who we are. And I think the way we see the world, what we observe, and we don't experience, we don't see the ways that GDP as a measure of any worth is crazy. We don't actually see anything that doesn't match an exchange model is not considered really to be a social relationship. Exchange, everybody, you're engaged in you're both engaged in a way that allows it to be recognized as social, given these abstractions. In gift, it's not, because it's unilateral, because it flows, it is very hard to see unless we have to invent, to realize, to see, to recognize that the giving is a material relationship. It's an original relationship. It's the basic way we're constructed as human beings, and it's the basic way that all of our earlier human societies survived. And that not only is that the case, but that what has been defined as the market is absolutely parasitical on the gift. The gift is still with us. The gift is nature. The gift is all of the unpaid work that women and many others do. Everyone does, actually, not just the unpaid work, but all the care, not work for the labor force, but all that we do to keep ourselves going and to be in human community is what the market is extracting from. And we know it. It's not that that's a new idea, but the fact that we can see the two paradigms of giving and exchange, we can see the parasitism of the exchange, and we can see the distortion that makes on our basic human relationships. It's also important to see that because it allows us to understand that in order to live better together, in order to survive together, in order to, in fact, value each other, we don't need to create anything new in terms of human relationships. We don't need to create socialist man. We don't need to live as higher beings. We don't need to transcend our clay roots. We need to be able to be together. We need to be able to be ourselves. And in terms of alienation, it's interesting, I think it's clear if you read Marx earlier and later, that he always was very aware and very concerned with alienation. He talked about, and I've got some quotes here I might have a chance to read, but he was looking, he spent many years of his life, and I think, more years than he wanted to spend, looking at the alienation of workers' labor power, and seeing how that worked, and looking at, and you can see his concern with the alienation of individual labor alienation. And I think he did fabulous job, absolutely good, really, very important. But there's a prior alienation than the individual alienation from an individual and their capacities. And that's the alienation from each other. Our first and prior human alienation is from each other. That is from the gift and from what we're born with, born into, and what shapes us. And we need to theorize gift economy, and we need to see it in order to be able to understand that this is the prior alienation, and that helps us, in fact, I think, vision what needs to change. It helps us see that we can do it. We need to keep on finding ways to keep the relationship with each other, to keep the space that we can be human. That allows us to see a lot of things, I think. When we think of the, well, I'll mention that later, solidarity, what that means to be solid. But so we can, when we can, another thing it helps us do is it sees the continuity or the connection or with indigenous communities. The struggles today in terms of reconciliation and is important. We need a vision, we need a theorizing, we need a sense of the basis of a vision to move forward, and the basis of our critique of this system that is very much and a recognition of what the values are, what the worldviews are, what the relationships with nature are that indigenous communities can bring, and in fact are very consciously and awarely, in some senses, leading on that today. And there's a discussion, there's attention, or often disagreements in terms of how much Marx's philosophical and economic concerns and analysis are related, and how much is a consistency there. And I think one thing that being able to see a gift paradigm and a materialist gift paradigm, a maternal economy paradigm, it allows us to very clearly see that if one has that paradigm, if one understands that our first alienation is from ourselves, and one sees that one can see with giving, if you're looking at giving, there's no disconnection between economy and society and culture, between the spiritual. Those things are all the same thing, because they're all human relationships. And so one could, in fact, I think it really helps see the continuity of Marx's thinking, and the fact that alienation and man and the economic, the analysis of the economic relationships are very, very closely connected. But Marx always did see, or tended to write of alienation in individual terms. You can see that there's an awareness and of the importance of, and the fact of, and the existence of social relationships apart from labor. But he hasn't theorized those. He hasn't seen those. There's a sense in which in the earlier manuscripts, he talks more generally about man and species man and so on and so forth. And later on, he comes to insist that, and I've got this quote, that man is always only the shape of the social relationships that he's in. And of course, if you don't notice the social relationships before you're an adult man, you can't bring them together, And I think Marx would have, I think he was brilliant. I think, he might have been able to see the mother, and he might have been able to see our humanity in that way. But it's that's the sense in which it seems to me is the gift economy allows us not to really see the way that it makes it clear that we can build intrinsic value into very deeply and centrally into our materialist analysis of which recognizes use value and understands exchange value is damaging as the predominant and defining abstraction. Can see all the ways and can see it better and better now as everything is being commodified. But when we got a gift paradigm understanding and we got that analysis, we can see that when we're in relation in our basic formation, we are giving value to the other and valuing ourselves. And then we can see that when we build that into our understanding of the historical development of class relationships from patriarchy and the initial separations, I think one of the key things about giving and exchange is that in a giving context, you have absolutely no need to measure anything except for itself. When you're getting into exchange, whether you want to be fair or whether you want to make a profit, you have to be able to compare everything to everything else. You have to have a way of saying, well, that door is more important than that apple, more valuable than that apple. I mean, it's an absurdity. It's an existential absurdity. What could, but anyway, you have to, once you're into exchange, you have to be able to do that. And when you have, until and unless you have that way of thinking, even as a tool, you would never think, is that man more valuable or important than that woman? Or is that, you would, to divide, to think about categorizing, abstracting in that way, wouldn't be necessary and wouldn't be possible. Now, of course, with this universal exchange abstraction, we can't think any other way. We almost can't do it. We can sometimes look at a beautiful sunset and just think how beautiful it is. It's not like we've totally lost that limb, but we don't use it. It's gone weak. It isn't what defines our world for us, or even oftentimes our possibilities when we're thinking about it. And so that I think this understanding this theoretical paradigm is got to be at the heart, has got to be one of the main projects in order to be able, for us to be able to see what we need to do. And not just, I think increasingly, we can see the desperation that things are in, and we can see the absurdity, and we can see that the destruction is going into every corner. And in fact, not only did the development of capitalism lead to increased concentration, monopoly, inequality, it has, through this exchange abstraction, it's not building our power, building our capacities to get to communism. And this is a quote about in a higher phase of communist society, after the enslaving subordination of the individual to the division of labor, and therewith also the antithesis between mental and physical labor has vanished, after labor has become not only a means of life, but life's prime want. This is after all of the particular capitalist impoverishments, after the productive forces have also increased with the all-round development of the individual and all the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly, only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois right be crossed into its entirety and society inscribe on its banners, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. We have that from birth.
Yeah.
That's what we are. That's what we're born into.
Yeah.
And that's still how we survive. That is how we're still going in a system that is designed to create scarcity through the resilience of gift.
That's a beautiful place for us to end right
Thank you.
now. Yes. And then to bring us into a place of maybe a little more dialogic orientation with the people who are listening. If I see that there may be at least one question that's there and some comments. And if you will indulge me at the very end, I think that we might have an opportunity for a part 2, and we're going to be pretty fluid about how that comes about and what that's going to look like. But I want you to know that we have some time left. We did extend our time to 30 minutes past the hour. So if we go to that time, that's good. And if we don't go to that time, that's also good. But we are hoping and we are thinking that this is such an important conversation that perhaps we would like to do a part 2 and offer in a much more open forum where there can be dialogue. So with that, I'm going to open up to the questions, and perhaps Jen, did you want to have any comments before we actually take the first question?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful session and so informative about so many things. I just wanted to comment on Angela's last citation of Marx about from each according to his or her ability, to each according to his or her need. We need to add on to that the ability to give again. That is, we need a society of abundance where gifts can go around and the receiver of the gift can give again to somebody else because they're not pauperized and without anything to give. So that I just wanted to add that on because we need a vision of a world that's not on our same standards and with our same underpinnings of disaster all the time. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the notion that Vandana brought forward as a living system, which is things are flowing. You know, death is when the gift stops. You know, when it stops, everything sort of dies off. So things need to continue.
But you still fertilize the soil when you die, you know. I mean, that's it's a circle.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. So I'm wondering if Liliana, do you have a question for us, perhaps?
Yes, I do. From the questions, there's 2 questions from, and I'm going to put them together from Ciola, Kathleen Bromley, and it's this first one is for Jen. Is the exchange a lie? And then there's another question by her too that says, is exchange really happening anymore, or is just pure theft at this point? Would it be more like Guy Debord, La Society du Spectacle, more than Marx at this point? So the second question goes for everybody, but the first one she directed it to Jen. And then that I'll repeat, is the exchange a lie?
I think exchange is a lie in some ways because it denies usually that it's getting a gift. That is, the market exchange or capitalist exchange is always done in order to get more, in order to get a gift from somewhere, and that is profit. So profit comes from the surplus labor, the unpaid labor of the workers, and so that is that part of the labor that is unpaid. And so that is a gift that the laborers are giving to the workers are giving to the capitalist, but it's not recognized, as everybody thinks it's what the capitalist deserves. And so that is a little, it's not little, a margin of gift inside of exchange, and that nobody sees that. And so that makes it exchange, which appears to be equal, a lie. Exchange is also a lie in the sense that it is done in order to satisfy your own need and not the need of the other. So you can give whatever kind of product you want to the other person if they'll buy it. And it doesn't even have to really satisfy their needs. So you can cheat a lot through exchange. And even when you're saying this is an equal exchange and you agreed to pay the amount I asked for. It's just there's a lot of wiggle room inside of exchange that seems to be equal for doing something false that is unequal. That's so. Is it in and of itself a lie? I don't know. I think lying is based on an exchange logic. That is, you give in order to you say something, give that idea or those words to a person in order that to satisfy their need, their cognitive need or their communicative need, their need to know. And if you tell them something false, that it's your ego orientation that's guiding that, and that's like exchange. It's the same mode as exchange. So a lie is an exchange, but exchange is not always a lie, I would say, although a lot of times it is.
And I add to, but the exchange wage relation, the wage relationship is, I think, you know, the big where the capitalist says, I'll pay you for what it costs you to reproduce your labor power, and then gets in exchange the wage relationship gets all the surplus value that the worker produces. So right at the heart of the capitalist system is, and I think it's a really good analysis on Marx's part about how the labor goes in and does his work and makes the capitalist rich. And then of course they say, well, we're putting you to work, we're giving you some kind of pittance to live on, so you know, thank us very much, and realize that we're the ones that create the worth. So on that level, a lie of exchange is right at the heart of capitalism. And then we get all the other lies, you know, less structured centrally, but definitely there for sure.
Thank you, Angela. Anna, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
There was a question. What was the question, the second question? Liliana, can you repeat, please?
Yes. The second question is exchange really happening anymore, or it's just pure theft at this point? Would it be more like Guy Debord, La Society, the Spectacle, more than Marx at this point?
Okay.
I can read it again.
Yeah. Good
Okay.
question.
Okay, I will start saying that exchange continues is, I will say that expanded, totally expanded all over the world. There is nobody outside of the commodity production. And we all are, what my husband said, we all are commodity holders. We all are carrying this big bag of commodities. We can't live outside of commodities. The point is that we see how the commodities are now being produced and reproduced. I can see, for instance, the new way to expand the market is through extractivism. Extractivism is the new form of the last parts of the earth are now being curbed. The mountains, the lakes, the rivers, there is nothing outside of the market. That is a very problematic situation because most people used to live from their area, the local area. They used to gather, they used to have communities around themselves. Since the expansion of extractivism, for instance, in Latin America, we see all these women confronted by different kinds of illness, abortion of different kinds. I'm sorry. We have a terrible sound here. Can you please tell him to stop? Oh, okay. We see these women in Latin America, all of them gathering in different countries to discuss what to do, Okay, I'm sorry, I won't be able to continue since there is a terrible sound right now. Somebody is cutting a tree.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Well, maybe we can come back to you. And Jen, would you?
Yeah, I think that that exchange is, I mean, I don't think exchange is really a good thing to start out with. So to say, is there still exchange? Yeah, I think there is, but exchange already from the beginning is a false interaction. Maybe it's a little bit better than just directly stealing somebody else's work or property or life altogether. It might seem a little bit better, but it does include that lie, that part of lie, that concealment of the gifts that it's grabbing. So yeah, I think exchange still does exist, and the fact that it keeps on grabbing is not a surprise. So yeah.
In terms of that question, I think it's interesting to given the way the exchange abstraction is so completely defining of our world views these days, including those who want to have equality. We're still thinking about exchange. That's still an exchange kind of frame. We have to ask if there isn't anything we see. Do we see giving these days? Do we see gift? That's more a question than isn't everything, because if we see our social relationships in exchange terms, and we do, that's what we've been taught, like as if earlier societies where everything wasn't measured and exchanged, they're like considered to be pre-social, because what's the social thing is when we can measure what we do, like that's a kind of a mind fuck, actually, a big one. So the thing is, can we see anything but exchange? Really? Yeah.
Yes, I would say, yeah. For me personally, I just wanted to weigh in on this question. I was raised in the United States in a capitalist country, but I was raised by Filipino parents with a Filipino culture in my home. And I always saw money as one of the resources, not the only way to get things done. And I think that is the major paradigm that has to switch. There's, when the lens is looking at everything as a commodity, using the terms, as Angela says, from inside the exchange theory, then everything is exchange. But to answer the question directly, yes, exchange does happen, and yes, clear theft is going on. Clear theft is not exchange. is completely extraction, is completely just taking. But there are almost 8 billion people on the planet today, and I would not assume that every indigenous culture lives in a commodified environment. In fact, most of the indigenous people that I know who are living subsistently are not in an exchange mode at all. They recognize that they have a responsibility, unfortunately, because of the outside pressures of the dominant culture, to have to understand money, to have to be able to work with the system. And then it's easy to get caught up in the system. But where they actually approach the value of their lives, the meaning of their lives, and how they ensure that they and their family can coexist is not within a moneyed system at all. So I think part of the reason why the maternal gift economy has always appealed to me has been the notion that we must acknowledge, we sort of have to back into our future, a place that we began. We need to not stay in that background of the past, but recognize the actual foundation of life itself and how we valued the self, which at that time as an infant would include your motherers, not just your own mother, but all those in your community around you, your community itself. So I just wanted to put that view forward, because even though I was raised in a city, even though I was raised, I was born in 1954, so post World War II, post Korean War, during the Vietnam War, you can move into many segments of the United States and see that there are at least two economic systems going on concurrently. So, Judith, I think there's another question in the Q&A, or if you have another question that you've seen.
There was a question very early on from Patricia. She asks for a better understanding of why the Marxist economic model was and is always related with a political dictatorship whenever a country claims to be organized in that way. So the relationship between Marxist model and political and politics and gifting. That's
I could say, I guess I think I don't want to give an impression that I think Karl Marx is an incredible, really theorist politically, and I don't want to give it, but I think Karl Marx has as much to do with a communist state as Jesus Christ has to do with the Christian church. I mean.
Okay, wow, that. And is that a dictatorship?
Well, I'm saying that some churches get closer to what is in Jesus Christ as the Son of God, if you want to say, as Jesus Christ's principles, and they get in varying close and varying whatever, but the church isn't the way to in general, the organized religion, in my view, is not the best expression of, or the way to get to the messages that are really, really important in Christianity or whatever. So you don't look at if you decide you're not going, you're going to, that Jesus Christ must have had a, some kind of flaw if these churches are what he was all about. That's not the way around. It's not the best way to understand what's in the Bible.
Jen?
Yeah, I would answer the question by saying that the problem is patriarchy. You know, the whole Soviet system was still patriarchal, and our capitalism here is absolutely patriarchal. With everything is for power over, and money gives you the power over and puts you in these positions of domination, which are patriarchal. And even if you get rid of capitalism and you remain patriarchal, you have not solved the problem. In that you cannot have a functional political system that is, you know, for life if you're going to base it on patriarchy. And capitalism is just an instrument of patriarchy, and vice versa. Patriarchy is an instrument of capitalism. The two are combined, and the gift economy is neither one. It's neither patriarchal nor based on exchange and exploitation. So that's the answer. So we need a maternal gift economy is what we need.
Well, we have a maternal gift economy that we probably all might have had when we were very little. We just need to learn how to practically apply it in a world today.
Yeah.
That's right. Have the political will and the means to be able to do that.
But even
Yeah.
politics itself, I mean, even the function, the word, the concept of politics is still patriarchal. So I don't know how to get to that.
Say something. I'm not sure whether I am in conversation. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, it's something I lost here. But it seems to me that you are still talking about the Marx that has been the traditional Marxism. We are now talking about the ecological Marxism. That's different than the traditional Marxism. The traditional Marxism, I said at the beginning, that works around the contradiction between forces of production or capitalist force of production and capitalist relations of production. He never divided or discussed the conditions of production, which are the ones we are now talking about. The family, the state, the education, the health, all new things. Marx couldn't figure out what we are discussing now.
Sure.
He couldn't.
No.
We are, at this particular time, we are talking about the conditions of production, which has been enlarged by the ecological, I will say, the eco-socialists. From that particular point of view, we see how the class struggle has been expanded because there is, these conditions of production have been done already. We see the conditions of women, the women reproductive work not recognized, the peasants' work not recognized, or the indigenous people knowledge is not recognized. Nature ability to give us everything is not recognized. However, from this new perspective, I would say that they are recognizing the fact that women are oppressed, that women really have been able to produce the life. Women have been carrying life. We are the subjects now, even in the Marxist way to say, women are the carriers of life. And that has been a big step from the traditional Marxist to the ecological Marxism. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Liliana, have you picked out a little jewel, perhaps?
Yes, I have a comment from Marta Benavides to everyone. And she says, right now, the only way we're able to solve the issues we face, from economics to health to making a living in general terms is by mutuality and solidarity. In the pandemic, this was evident in my country for sure. Marta.
Oh, I'd love to comment on that.
Please, Angela.
I didn't manage to fit that into my talk, actually. I really think that that is, in terms of knowing gift and in a way the power of gift, I think the one experience that we do have is in solidarity, in social movements where everyone is together providing what's needed, where it's needed, based on what we each have. And there's a real difference in terms of the power, but in terms of the experience when you're in a movement than when you're in an association or an NGO, whatever the intentions and however much there's a shared idea of the aim, there's something about a social movement and the way things flow based on need. And, as Jen says, it flows, and the resources are maximized for everybody individual and everybody collectively. And that is solidarity, and we need not only solidarity in movements, we need to be moving toward that in all the facets of our social life. And that's the revolution we need, really the human revolution. And we can see it in our social movements at their best, at their most gifting and most visionary, and the means and the ends are closest together. And we can see it in indigenous cultures and the kinds of circumstances that Letitia mentioned she grew up in various communities and so on. So, yeah. Nice to hear.
Thank you, Angela. Yes. Anna, did you have anything that you wanted to offer to? Yes.
I want to say that at this particular time, even solidarity is becoming too late from my point of view. Because I have been in the rainforest for the last 6 or 8 months, I have seen during the rainy season, there is no rain anymore there. Therefore, people are really in trouble, not just people, the trees, the animals, everyone. From January to July in the rainforest of Peru, there is winter. Winter means rain every 2 or 3 hours. Small rains, but rains. But now we don't have rain. In January, we didn't have rain for 15 days. In February, we have no rain for 10 or 15 days. And when the rain came, it was so big that destroyed the majority of the parts of the area. Then what we have to see now, the solidarity is not enough any longer. We have to think, how can we really change, not just ourselves as individuals, but how can we change the system that is destroying completely our conditions of life?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I don't think it's sufficient, but it's necessary.
Thank you. Jen, did you have anything that you wanted to offer?
No, I don't think I can say anything in particular right now. No.
Okay, great. Let's take a look. Maybe Liliana, do you have another question for us?
Yeah, there's a question. There's a comment from Peggy Antrobus, and she says, "Thanks, Anna, for drawing attention to the work of ecofeminists, and to Angela for speaking of our alienation with the world as it is shaped today. I think the only hope is to recognize that many different groups and initiatives are coalescing around an understanding of the need for a new paradigm, the paradigm reflected in the values of the maternal gift economy. This is from Peggy Antrobus.
Thank you, Peggy. Does anybody have a comment back to Peggy? Or any thoughts?
Right
was
on.
Yeah, really, exactly. Right on, Peggy.
I have another comment, Leticia.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Liliana.
Okay. Then from Kathy Wallace, she says, money is dead, has no energy. All life is energy flow of endless interrelationships.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I see a question from Joan Marler in the chat that I'd like to read out. How can the pending loss of women's reproductive rights in the United States be understood in terms of the reality of the maternal gift economy? Actually, I can't see any way of understanding the loss. It just is horrific, but Jen or Angela?
Well, I would say that's misogyny, and that patriarchy and the construction of a gender that's superior by virtue of being unconnected to life and all of the kinds of gift. That's one of those things that's yeah. What can you say?
Jen?
Well, and the fact that so many children die of hunger, poverty, disease, that is not important to these people who are anti-abortion, and yet, you know, they don't want people to be killed in the womb, and yet it doesn't matter at all if they die when they're alive. So, and I mean in life. So I think that is really a contradiction about what women are doing when we're having children, and what our autonomy is, and so on. So we have to re-empower women and women as gifters, as part of an alternative economy, in order to allow us to control our bodies and to know what we can, how we can give, how much can you give? You know, if you don't have the resources to mental, physical, monetary, whatever, to give to your children, then you shouldn't have children. So that is, if the people don't want abortion, they should make the whole country live in abundance instead of taking all the wealth away.
I think another way is that it just shows the power of the distortion of the world. When you think that the movement against women's abortion rights is in the name of life, defense of life, and who defends life? It's women. You know, if you had to rely on women or the state, you know, or the church to defend life, you would pick women. And there's no doubt that's what, you know. So the fact that you would have a movement that's organized against women to protect life is the biggest absurdity in the world. Incredible chutzpah of men to do that. And that isn't to say that women and men in that movement, some of them are not just hating on women. They want to defend life, but you know, what are they seeing here in the world in terms of governments and the church? So I think it's related to gift economy, because maternal gift economy, because we need to see that. We need to see the maternal gift economy. It mustn't remain so invisible and so unseen.
I like to say something, not probably regarding to that. I'm not sure whether you are listening to me.
Yes, we can hear you, Anna.
Okay, sorry that I am outside. I was wondering, I totally agree with the give economy. However, if we don't see the system, how the system works in destroying the whole humanity, destroying the whole environment, we cannot go further. We really need to go further. I totally embrace the give economy. However, I find that it's so important to discuss the system that is creating the whole fire all over the world. When the Amazon is not producing enough rain, for instance, there is not enough humidity that travels from the Amazons to the north, which feeds the whole environment of the north, the Amazon. That's why I think we really need to discuss the issue of the system. And I'm sorry, but I have to leave. My computer have a low battery. And I have to go.
Thank you for joining us, Anna.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yes,
Thank
it
you
was
for
wonderful
coming.
to see you. Yes.
Thank you.
We'll see you again. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We have
Bye.
about 10 more minutes to the official end of
Hi, Anna.
our
Bye.
time. So
Gracias.
let's see if there's another question. Judith, did you see a question that maybe perhaps?
If you're going to ask for a short one, this isn't. Two questions from Marta and from Mary Condren. Marta says, it talks about the ways more and more countries are uniting with the European Union and thus with NATO and spending more and more on arms and arming while saying that they're working for peace. And Mary adds to that the arms race depends on the notion of defense rather than the maternal value of protection. And US civilians who insist on bearing arms talk about defense. So, and so do all the other countries now gearing up to expand their defenses. If a tiny portion of the money spent on arms were spent on protection, the world would be a better place. So the whole issue of how gifting, and it's sort of related to the other one as well, and politics and defense are all tangled up together.
Angela or Jen, would you like to respond to that? Jen?
Well, I could just, I could just say that and the basis of this is also the fact that we don't know actually what happens, because there's so many lies that are sent around. We can't, the general public doesn't know what the reasons for these attacks and counterattacks and so on are. And so much of it is involved with money, and it's a economic and political move, all of this fighting. It's not just, the armaments also, they think of the armaments business, how much money is made, billions and billions are made on that. And, and then you have the tail wagging the dog, as they used to say, that is that they have the wars in order to make the armaments and make money on the armaments. So I find it's all just a huge confusion and really sickening.
Yes, I think we can all agree, Jen, that it's definitely sickening. Angela, did you have anything that you wanted to offer?
Well,
Those-
it's just, you know, it's another one of those examples of the kind of thinking or frameworks that we are shaped by or trapped in terms of, you know, building up arms to try to prevent war or to stop arms intrusions. I mean, Mary looks at the kinds of shapes that kind of thinking takes and all of the ways things are defined in non-gift terms, in the kind of language and the kind of even imaginary that is reflected in a lot of the language and the reasoning around war and what's going on. But I do agree with Jen that we really, we're also working in a context where the information is just not, it's not reliable in terms of who's pulling triggers and what kind of powers, interests are being protected and prioritized, and how much life, well, of course it doesn't really life, it doesn't have a high priority at all in the processes around this thing and decision-making in a certain kind of way that's very disturbing.
Yes, Jen, did you have just something else that you wanted to offer?
Yeah, just a short thing, and that is that war is based on exchange. That is, you hit somebody and they hit you back, and you have to keep on doing that and getting, upping the ante. And that is violence in general, I believe, or fighting in general is based on an imitation of gifting. And that's how patriarchy does it. And so it's not surprising that so much money goes into it. And then all the technology of having a bigger bomb and all those it's really very patriarchal. And the gift economy has to stand aside and wiped out by that, and unless people can actually see needs and satisfy them. But that's difficult in a war situation. So.
Thank you, Jen. Angela, Jen, would you like to say anything in closing? I mean, is that what you'd like to be as your closing statement? And then I'd like to leave it to Angela. She wanted to read an excerpt from the Feminists for a Gift Economy position statement for a peaceful world, which I think would be a beautiful place for us to end today.
Oh dear, there was something I wanted to reply to, but I can't find it. I don't right now. So.
You sure?
Well,
yeah. Well, here's what I'd like to say. Here's what I'd like to say. Right at the top of our, before we opened up the room, we had a short conversation. I'm kind of putting my Salon team on the spot here, but we talked about doing a part 2 to this conversation. And as I imagined, towards the end of our conversation, we got more and more into questions and dialogue. So perhaps what we'd like to do is in 2 weeks, do a part 2 in a different format. This is challenging. We've not done it before, but what we'd like to be able to do is to do a meeting version for part 2, where the room opens up and we can actually have conversation. So Jen, maybe we can find that question and you can address it then in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. And all of you can review this, the recording, which will go up, and we can come back to your questions. I'm sure you'll have more and more comments, but it'll be a much more free-flowing, we're getting courageous now, to be able to allow for the dialogue. Yes, Jen.
Oh, I just wanted to mention that we're also going to have this presentation of the book by Darsha Narvaez and Four Arrows on an alternative Saturday. Will you, Letitia, what is the date of the Saturday?
It's Saturday the 28th, May the 28th. Yeah.
May the 28th. And so they're going to speak about the new book that that talks about, that it's a sort of anthology of Native American writings with their Darsha and Four Arrows comments on it that help us understand and connect to those writings in a sort of a gift economy way. Yeah.
So, Angela, if you would please, and then I'll just come back on after you finish reading the statement.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. I thought this, I love this statement. This is from a Feminist for a Gift Economy position statement for a peaceful world that was taken to World Social Forum in 2002 and is still relevant. This is the closing section of the statement, and it says, "We want a market-free society, not a free market society. We want a world of abundance where bodies, hearts, and minds are not dependent on the market. A world where gift-giving values of care are accepted as the most important, the leading voices of society at all levels. A world where women and men enjoy taking care of children and each other. A world where everyone is able to express their sexuality in life-loving ways, where their spirituality is treasured and their materiality is honored. A world where trust and love are the amniotic fluid in which all our children learn to live. A world where boys and girls are socialized without gender limits as gift-giving humans from the very beginning. A world where Mother Nature can be seen as the great gift giver, her ways understood and her infinitely diverse gifts celebrated by all. A world where humans and all species can reach their highest potential in relationship rather than their lowest potential in parasitism and competition. We want a world where money does not define value nor legislate survival. A world where all categories and processes of parasitism and hate, racism, classism, ageism, ableism, xenophobia, homophobia are regarded as belonging to a shameful past. A world where war is recognized as expressing unnecessary patriarchal syndromes of dominance and submission in a ridiculously sexualized death ritual using phallic technological instruments, guns, and missiles of ever greater proportions. A world where the psychosis of patriarchy is recognized, healed, and no longer validated as the norm. We will create the world we want while keeping intact our full humanity, humor, and hope." So how's that sound?
Thank you so much, Angela. That was beautiful. And it's so perfect. I want to thank our speakers, Genevieve, Vaughan, Vanda Shiva, Isla, and Angela Miles, for your words today and your wisdom. Liliana and Judith for providing the questions and watching all of those comments scrolling. Our tech support, Diane. And the International Feminists for the Gift Economy Network, and each of you for joining us. Please join us again in 2 weeks on May the 21st for Salon number 33, part 2 of Marx, the Market, and the Mother. We'll be, I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but I have just said that we're going to do it in the meeting format, which means I'll be facilitating. So please be kind, and I'll be stacking you so you can be talking to one another. This video recording will be posted on our website at thematernalgifteconomy.org. And please, if you have any questions or comments, maternalgifteconomy@gmail.com. Please remember to take really good care of yourself. Stay safe, be well, and be kind to one another. The comments will be up with the recording And I hope that you'll review it before we see you in 2 weeks, everyone. So Judith and Liliana and Diane, just put your cameras on so we can all wave and say goodbye to everyone. Thank you so much, everyone. We're
Thank
just
you,
so happy.
Leticia. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Thank
Bye
you,
for
Leticia.
now. We'll
Bye-bye.
see you in 2 weeks.